So at this stage we have a nice setup of class string that demonstrates behavior very similar to Java string, at least with respect to these two Java methods, length and character add. It's time to take a look at the list of the topics for our presentation. And we already have started this conversation about object creation and object constructor. So in terms of object creation and destruction, the set of considerations requires us to talk about these things like controlling object creation using constructors, what is the default constructor, other types of constructors, and also destructors. So object creation is greatly improved by using constructors. So constructor syntax we already demonstrated, and here the idea is to, when we create objects or instantiate objects, we want to place them in a good state, or at least in identifiable or known bad state, if you want to consider these types of things. But in either case, this is a predictable, identifiable state and not an unknown or random state, which is now a really bad state and not very safe to use it like this. So again, using rounded parentheses, apparently in header file point.h there is a point class declared, and now we want to instantiate point. Apparently it's like on a 2D plane in the coordinate system using coordinates 5 and 10 create a point. So but these are the initial values. In our case we could do it also like this, and let's actually try this very quick. So we can try this syntax as well. Let's just make sure that we can build it this way, and of course we can. So every declaration of an object results in a calling of a constructor. So constructor is always invoked. Okay, so in our situation, when we have this main function example and we create our object, then constructor is always invoked. If you do not provide a constructor, C++ will do it for you, but this is not necessarily what you want. Yes, it's true. For example, what we could do, in fact, let me open under View, Other Windows, Web Browser, so I don't have to switch between Visual Studio and an external web browser. Okay, so this opens right here, and I'll just simply copy the URL of our presentation right here. Okay, very good. And then we can move it to the side like this, and so we can go side by side a little bit easier. So I was going to say that if I construct string hello without any kind of initialization, it will invoke default constructor, and default constructor is provided by the system if no other constructors are available. However, already a compiler already understands that we provided specific constructor that expecting pointer to a string of characters. And now it will prevent us from using default constructor without parameters, because it thinks that whoever is the designer of this class wants to construct objects with this or this type of initialization. So if we try building it, it'll say string no appropriate default constructor is available. So if we decided to add specific constructors, we must define default constructor explicitly like this. Default constructor is a constructor that has no parameters. Of course, we have our implementation file, so we just, once again, we just perhaps we can copy this already, right? So we have specific constructor. Now let's put on top of this specific constructor a default constructor without any parameters. So we no longer have this input parameter. So we can just initialize our string with an empty string like this, right? So we just specify an empty string. And of course, calling in main function character at position 0 now becomes dangerous, because there is no character over there. In fact, there is a character terminating character 0, but still it's not probably what you want your users to do. So nevertheless, let's finish this, and we have finished it already. So if we use default constructor, which I'll just demonstrate on this side, okay, so now we construct hello string without any initialization parameters. We're expecting that compiler will decide to call default constructor. So this is default constructor, simply because it has no parameters. Okay, yeah, so this is what I have so far right here. Let's save it, and if I try building it now, yeah, so now it builds fine, and we can try running it, Control F5. So this time nothing is printed, and I guess the length of our, so basically the length of our string is printed as 0, and the null character is not shown at all. It's like invisible in this output. So we could probably improve our output by using some kind of decoration here, and say that this is our length. Right, so we can say length is this, and display what the length is right here, and then character at position 0, we can just maybe enclose it in square brackets to just add some kind of decoration here, like this. So this should be easier to understand what it gets is printing. So apparently this is the null character that is appended at the end of empty string, and we're still printing it. So apparently this console window shows it as a space. That's what it decides to do with an output. But length of our string, because we're using default constructor, it has no characters. It's initialized with an empty string. Now notice that it is important to realize is that perhaps we can go back to hello and name this one empty, right? This string we can call empty. So string literal hello world is detected by the compiler, and of course it gets allocated somewhere in read-only memory, right? So read-only memory is populated with these characters because we're using it. Likewise, anywhere in the code, whenever there is a string literal like this empty string, it's a string literal specifying empty string. This empty string will be also constructed somewhere, right? And it will contain only the 0 terminating character like this, right? So there will be very little string with just one character in it. And this pointer to string, if we construct this empty string, when this object is constructed, internally it contains the pointer to string, so it will be pointing to this object right here. But this memory where these objects are allocated, all string literals are placed in this read-only global memory segment.